Welcome back to the channel. If there's one thing Invincible has taught us, it's that you should never trust a guy with a perfect mustache. Today, we are taking the ultimate deep dive into the scariest, most brutal alien race in comic book history, the Viltrumites. We're covering everything: their biology, their hidden weaknesses, how they are raised, the truth behind the Great Purge, the fall of Lord Argall, the betrayal of Thaedus, the massive lie Omni-Man told Earth, how entire planets got wiped out, and how Grand Regent Thragg built and almost lost the Empire. Warning: we are heading into heavy spoiler territory for both the animated series and the comic lore, so consider yourself warned. Hit that like button, subscribe, and let's talk about intergalactic space fascism. On the surface, Viltrumites look exactly like regular humans, just with a much stricter dress code and a borderline unhealthy obsession with mustaches. But biologically, they are basically Superman, if Superman woke up every single day and chose absolute violence. Their bodies are built on smart atoms, meaning their cells literally adapt and learn from trauma. If a Viltrumite gets beaten to a pulp and somehow survives, they heal and come back even stronger, basically like a Saiyan Zenkai boost on steroids. They have insane strength, ridiculous speed, flight, near invulnerability, and can hold their breath for up to 2 weeks, which is why you'll see them flying through space like they forgot gravity exists. And then there's their most broken ability: genetic dominance. Their DNA doesn't mix, it conquers. If a Viltrumite has a child with another species, their DNA overrides everything else. That's why Mark Grayson is basically full Viltrumite despite being half human. This isn't just biology, it's conquest strategy. They don't just take over planets, they replace them. But the real nightmare isn't just their power, it's how they are raised. Viltrumites are not raised, they are forged. Their entire system is built on survival of the fittest, where weakness isn't corrected, it's eliminated. And because they age slower the older they get, a child who looks 10 might have already lived for decades. Nolan's childhood proves this. He wasn't trained, he was hunted by his own parents. Full combat, no mercy. Imagine your parents trying to actually kill you just to see if you deserve to live. That's normal on Viltrum. As an instructor, he stands over a child with his hand on her head, ready to crush her skull if she gets a question wrong. No second chances. And then comes the homework. The children are sent into the wilderness with no home, no support, nothing. Survive on your own. Then come back and fight each other to the death. Only the survivors move on. So by adulthood, every Viltrumite has already killed, survived, and been stripped of empathy. But here's where it gets interesting. The Empire wasn't always like this. There was a golden age under Lord Argall. Argall was more than a ruler, he was basically worshipped, powerful, intelligent, respected. Under him, the Empire had structure and unity. They were still conquering planets, but it wasn't just mindless destruction. At least not yet, because Thaedus saw what it would become. He realized Viltrum's idea of betterment was just universal genocide with better branding. So he did the unthinkable. He assassinated Argall, not in a fair fight because that would have been suicide, but through betrayal. Then he fled and became known as the Betrayer. He thought killing Argall would stop everything. It didn't. It made it worse. Argall's death turned him into a martyr, and the Viltrumites completely lost it. This triggered the Great Purge. The Great Purge was pure insanity. Billions of Viltrumites turned on each other. Families wiped each other out. Cities were destroyed. The skies turned black with ash and the oceans literally ran red. They didn't just fight, they erased half their own species. By the end, only a few thousand remained, the strongest, the most brutal, the least human, and from that chaos Thragg rose. Thragg didn't just survive the purge, he dominated it. He became Grand Regent, claiming he would rule until Argall's rightful heir was found. And to be clear, at this point, Thragg did not know Nolan was part of the royal bloodline. Nolan being sent to Earth had nothing to do with that. That was just standard Viltrumite expansion. The truth only comes out much later. Because the Empire had a bigger problem, they were dying. Thaedus created the Scourge virus, and this thing was devastating. It attacked their smart atoms and wiped out 99.9% of the Viltrumite population. By the time we get into the main story, there are fewer than 50 pure-blooded Viltrumites left. 50. That's not an empire, that's an endangered species. And that's why Earth became important, not just for conquest, but for survival. Understand the fall of the Viltrumite Empire, you have to look back at the Great Purge, the brutal civil war where Viltrumites slaughtered their own weak, leaving behind a nearly indestructible but severely depleted population. Because of their dominant DNA, Earth wasn't just a target, it was a backup plan and a breeding farm. Nolan, one of the most loyal soldiers of the Empire, comes to Earth to conquer it, but instead, the world changes him. He gets a family, experiences love, and for the first time in his centuries-long life, he hesitates. That hesitation spreads to his son, Mark, who grows up human and feels the empathy and compassion that Viltrum tried to erase. This influence begins to affect other Viltrumites, but before that transformation can fully take hold, the first true war breaks out. The Viltrumite War reaches its most brutal peak on Viltrum itself, which stops feeling like a battlefield and starts feeling like the death of an entire world. With the help of Space Racer destabilizing the planet's core, Mark, Nalan, and Thaedus launch themselves at light speed directly through Viltrum, shattering the planet entirely and erasing millions of years of history in seconds. In the absolute chaos, Thragg makes his point by overwhelming Thaedus, the man who betrayed the old empire, and ripping his head clean off without hesitation. With their home world destroyed and their numbers reduced to fewer than 50 pure-blooded Viltrumites, Thragg is backed into a corner and forced to make a deal with Mark and Nalan. The remaining Viltrumites secretly relocate to Earth, blending in and interbreeding with humans since the DNA is almost 100% compatible. For a while the truce holds, but during this time on Earth, the truth about the royal bloodline comes to light. Analysis of Mark's blood reveals that Nalan is the true heir to the Empire as a direct descendant of Lord Argall. Thragg discovers this truth but keeps it secret to protect his power, eventually attempting to brutally assassinate Nalan to secure his throne. He fails, and when the other Viltrumite warriors witness the attack and the secret gets out, they turn on Thragg and strip him of his title. In a massive shift, Nalan becomes emperor and chooses to spare Thragg, exiling him instead of executing him, an act of mercy that allows Thragg to travel to Thraxan and rebuild an army of hybrid offspring that grow at an insane rate. This leads to a final, devastating conflict where Nalan eventually dies, leaving the heavy responsibility of the Empire to Mark. Among the strongest Viltrumites during this era were number 5, Omni-Man Mark Grayson, number 4, Thaedus, number 3, Conquest, number 2, Grand Regent Thragg, and number 1, Mark Grayson. Everything culminates in the final battle between Mark and Thragg on the literal surface of the sun, where they tear each other apart while burning alive until Thragg is finally destroyed. Mark officially takes the mantle of emperor and changes everything, taking the lie his father once told him, that Viltrumites were meant to protect the universe, and making it a reality by rebuilding the empire as guardians rather than conquerors. So now the real question is this: was Thaedus right? Or did killing Argall create something even worse? And was Thragg a necessary evil trying to save his species, or just a tyrant who refused to let go of power? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more deep dives, and I'll see you in the next one.